All right, so our topic today is evaluating the job offer. After this, Liz will send an email out with the PowerPoint in it. She'll also send an email out about the survey. If you haven't taken the survey, we ask that you take that just to kind of let us know your feedback and how we're doing. It is anonymous, so we won't know who you are and things of that nature. If you haven't already taken it, you are eligible to take it and get a $5 gift card for taking that. But if you've already taken it, unfortunately, we can't giving out $5 gift cards as much as I would like to do that, but we can't keep doing that. I think that's pretty much it. If anybody else joins, we'll just let them in as it goes. Does anybody have any questions before I let CC start? Oh, it's all you, CC.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for a conversation about evaluating the job offer. This is a topic that we typically cover in person, has some exercises associated with it. So I've changed things up, given this different format, and hopefully we'll be able to still make it a meaningful experience for you. As Tiffany said, my name is Cece Conover. Most recently, I was the Human Resources Director for the City of Fishers for 18 years and retired there in 2018. I've also worked in inbound call centers, employee leasing, and also business travel. So I've got a number of years of experience all in human resources. And a big part of what I did, certainly for the City of Fishers, was to do recruiting. So when I retired from the City of Fishers, I became more involved with Dress for Success. I had been doing volunteer work for them off and on for 10 years, predominantly in the back, sorting clothes and helping with fundraisers. So I'm thrilled to be able to work with the clients and help them with sharing some things that have gone well, that I've seen candidates do, and some things that have not gone well to help you guys be more successful in your job search. So today what we're going to talk about is evaluating the job offer, because if you're out there looking for a job, you're ultimately going to be getting some job offers. So we're going to talk about how to be strategic in evaluating those job offers and being thoughtful as you're receiving them to make sure that it's a good fit for you. And so I always talk about going through job searches, that it needs to be a two-way street. You want to make sure it's a good fit for you as they're evaluating to see if it's a good fit for them to have you on board. So as much as you're sharing information about yourself to get them to understand who you are, what you offer, you also need to be asking questions and doing some research to make sure it's a good place for you to be. And we'll talk about some of those things today. All right. So these are some of the things that we're going to talk about, discussing important factors to you and your situation. And as much as you feel comfortable throughout this Zoom presentation today, please feel free to interject and ask questions. We'll certainly offer some time at the end for lots of questions and answers if you have those. But I'm pretty informal. I also talk pretty quickly. So if I go through something that doesn't make sense to you or you want to spend more time, please let me know that. We're going to talk about an organization's culture. Sometimes that's a nebulous term and people don't really know what that means, or actually even how to determine what an organization's culture is. So we'll talk about some ways to get to that information and how you can make an assessment on what an organization's culture is like. We'll talk about salary and compensation and the difference between those two terms. We'll talk about benefits and then other considerations as you're making your job offer evaluation. And then again, as I said, at the end, we'll have some final thoughts, feedback, questions, and make it more interactive for you at that time. All right, so why should you take time to evaluate all the factors of your job offer? And that seems pretty straightforward, but as you'll see from this first slide, what happens oftentimes when people get a job offer, they're so excited that the emotion and relief that you feel from getting a job offer sometimes makes you say yes a little more quickly than maybe you ought to. And so this is where you need to put the pause button on and really take some time to step back and evaluate what you're being offered and being more diligent in reviewing it. A job, you're going to spend an awful lot of time at any job, full-time, part-time. A lot of your life is going to be spent at your job. So you want to make sure that you're making it a wise choice. So instead of letting the emotion of the moment take you over and immediately say yes, if you're given the offer verbally over the phone, ask if you can have some time to review it and to think about it. I don't know a recruiter that would say no to that. Typically, typically they would like to get an answer within, 2 business days. That seems very reasonable. But they are trying to get jobs filled pretty quickly. So asking for a week to evaluate would be unreasonable. But asking for a business day or two to review the offer is something that you should feel comfortable doing, because you do want to make sure it's a good choice for you. So what you need to do before you even get to this point, though, is to think about what is important to you. So if you haven't done that, I certainly encourage you to jot down at least 5 things that are important to you that you obtain in an organization or in a job. And then make sure that those things are being met when you're getting your job offer. So maybe it's making 2 checklists, and here's the things that you have to have. Does this evaluation or does this offer meet those 5 things that you want to make sure that you get in a job? Were there any promises of a promotion or a pay increase or a change from part-time to full-time or seasonal to regular? Any of those promises that were made verbally to you during the job interview process, make sure those are memorialized in writing. And the reason I say that is not because people are shady and trying to do things to coerce you to take a job. Things change. And perhaps the person that made that promise of a promotion or pay increase, or even a transition from part-time to full-time, maybe they're not in place at the time that that promotion or pay increase is meant to take place. So when you have something in writing, it allows you to be able to demonstrate that you were made a commitment, and you want to make sure that it's followed through on. So make sure that any promise or offers that were made verbally during the interview process is memorialized in writing in the job offer. Once you've evaluated it thoroughly, you're in a much better place to determine whether or not it's the job that you should take. And maybe you need to negotiate something better, whether that's the schedule, the pay, whatever. Or maybe you just need to reject the job offer completely. We'll talk about this later, but be sure if you do need to reject the job completely, to do so professionally, do so quickly, because you don't want to burn any bridges. You never know if something else, a different type of job is open at that organization, it comes up, and if you've handled the rejecting of that job offer poorly, then maybe they won't consider you for any future job openings. So in order to not burn bridges, remain respectful and professional, even if you need to politely say no. So, culture of an organization, what is that? It's dictated by the values, behaviors, beliefs, and norms. And you'll see it demonstrated in their words and the behaviors of the employees that work there. It can be influenced by the history of the organization. Maybe they're a fairly new organization and they're still growing and getting their legs under them and expanding quickly and putting more and more policies in place as they're moving forward. Maybe it's an organization that's been around for over 100 years. And so they've got, all those things dialed in, and maybe they are happy with where they are. It could be dictated by the type of product that they sell. By the market that they're involved in. If they're certainly in IT, they're typically going to be a much more fast-paced type of organization, and looking for cutting-edge products that can make them be more competitive in their market. Maybe they're local government, which is obviously where I came from, and so that makes certainly a different culture as well. The type of employees that they hire, what their management style is, how big they are, how many locations they have, all those things influence the culture of the organization, and you need to take that into consideration. It includes the vision, values, norms, systems, symbols, language. All those things are part of an organization's culture. So being mindful that it's a pretty big word that includes a lot of different things. So how do you figure out what an organization's culture is, and how do you know if their culture is right for you? First of all, determining and being thoughtful about how you're treated during the interview process. So were they quick to respond to your application by thanking you for applying? Do they get back to you quickly through all stages of the application process, and were they professional about it? If you did have a face-to-face interview, how were they face-to-face? When you walked into the organization, into the building, how were you treated and how were you greeted, and how were you handled? How does the environment feel to you? That might include how clean the building is, what the pace of work is. When you're sitting in the lobby for your interview, are people running around and it seems like complete chaos, or is it a little more subdued and quiet and seems a little bit more of a pleasant sort of environment to be in, if that's what it appeals to you? Check the social media for insights. So usually an organization might have some media channels that are working for them. Also see if you can figure out some social media sites for other players. So figure out what the CEO or the president of the company's name is. Check them out on LinkedIn. And you can find out a lot about some of the key management players by their LinkedIn pages. Know that the leaders of the organization heavily influence the culture of the organization. So that's why I encourage you to figure out who the president or CEO of the organization is. And you can find out a lot about them and what they value by what they do. So if there's someone who has a lot of formal education, they worked at a lot of organizations, maybe they've worked their way up through the organization. So those kinds of things indicate what they value and what their objective is. So once you do get an interview, as I said, it's a two-way street. You need to be asking questions too. So what kinds of questions can you ask to find out more about their culture? Ask about the management style. Is it more hands-on and they're in the trenches with the employees? Is it a more flat organization where there's not a lot of layers and tiers? Is it paramilitary, like you would find certainly in police and fire? So those kinds of things are helpful to give you a little bit more about what the management style is. How does a company recognize employee accomplishments? So do they recognize them individually? Is there employee of the month? Is there employee of the year? Certainly performance evaluations. What types of things do they do to recognize employee accomplishments? What qualities do successful employees in your organization possess? This is a great question to ask in an interview. And it gives you, again, an insight into what they value. So does the organization participate in a lot of philanthropic activities? Do they value that? Do they want to be part of the community? Or are they, more about head down and getting work done and trying to grow their business? And neither one is wrong or right. So you just need to understand what their motivations are and where they put their values. Asking the person that is interviewing you, why do they like working here? What makes you want to continue to work here? And finding that out, even just from that one person, is helpful because, we all have different places that we can work. We have choices all the time. Why is it that one person chooses to work for this company that you're also interviewing with? And try to find out what it is that connected with them and resonated with them. That will, again, help you a little bit to determine about the organization's culture, because it's huge in making you feel a certain way when you're there at work. As I said, you spend a lot of time there, so you want to be in an organization or in an environment that fulfills you in other intrinsic ways and not just the paycheck. So thinking about that and how that plays into your evaluating your job offer is certainly important. Cultural fit. Before the interview, trying to figure out from the company's website, like I said, see what information you can get from the website to figure out more about their culture. Maybe as you're in the website and digging around and poking around, you come up with questions. Remember to jot those down. I always tell people to go in with your questions written down, because getting into an interview can be a harrowing experience. It can be very stressful. And by the time you've gotten through the interview where they've asked you lots of questions, you've just forgotten every question you walked in the door with. Maybe some of the questions were answered for you through the interview process, but it's really helpful if you write them down so that you make sure that you get them addressed at the time. If you're trying to decide if the company is a right fit for you, don't forget it is a two-way street. So when they tell you, do you have any questions for me? Don't squander that opportunity. They really do want to answer questions for you. They might be on a tight timeline. They may have several things that they've got going on, other meetings they need to get to. But please, please do ask questions when you're in the interview. By asking the right questions, you'll be able to determine if it's the right place for you. And then what we also recommend is right after you've left the interview, maybe even as you're sitting in the car, or right after you get home or get to a place where you can think, let the wave of the emotion of the interview wash over you, shake it off, and then do some note taking and write down some things that were memorable to you during the interview process. Did you feel a connection with the people that you talked with? How did you feel when you were in there, in the organization's building and structure? What kinds of things stood out to you? So taking the time to really check in with yourself to say, wow, all right, if I get a job offer from this organization, what will be my reaction to that? Maybe you came out of there thinking, this is awesome, love this organization, I hope it works out. Or maybe you came out of it thinking, something doesn't quite feel right to me. And sometimes you need to think about your instincts and your gut. Sometimes it's telling you something. Or maybe it just generates some more questions that you can follow up with later. So taking that moment after you've had an opportunity to let the emotions of the interview pass over you and think through whether or not it's going to be a good organization for you to work for. All right. So making sense of the offer. In the next couple slides, what I'm going to do primarily is talking a little bit about some differences in terminology, because sometimes I find that candidates come in with certain terms that may or may not be accurate. So this will also help arm you with the right terminology. So salary and compensation is one of them. Salary means one thing, compensation means another. They're not the same thing. So compensation is the total amount of monetary and non-monetary pay provided to an employee in an organization. Types of compensation: base pay and commission. Those are your salary components. So we'll talk a little bit about what's base pay. You could be an hourly non-exempt employee, or you could be a salary exempt employee. If you're non-exempt, that means that you're eligible for overtime. And we'll talk a little bit about those two terms in just a moment. Commission means that you're paid for selling products or services. And it could mean that you'd be getting a base pay plus a commission, or it could be that you're purely commission. I know for myself that I could never, never take a job that is purely commission, because I am not a salesperson. I joke that I couldn't sell a dying man a bottle of water. That's just not my thing. I don't have that skill set. And I completely admire and respect people who do, but I know about myself that that's not for me. So again, types of compensation: the base pay and commission pay, those are what would be considered your salary. The other things that make up your compensation would be things like bonuses or incentive pay, travel, meals, housing allowances, and the other big component is benefits. So we'll talk about benefits as well. But when you factor in both the benefits, time off, bonuses, incentive pay, travel, maybe you have use of a company vehicle or a cell phone, all those things are the benefits that should factor into your total compensation conversation. And so when you get a job offer, hopefully it's going to include both the base salary as well as your compensation package that includes the benefits and such. And that's all very important information to factor in. Okay, non-exempt and exempt. These are two terms that the Department of Labor uses. And you'll find that some human resources people use them as well. And it's important for you to understand what the distinction is between non-exempt and exempt. Sometimes people use the terms hourly and salary interchangeably, but you can actually be exempt hourly, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So the non-exempt exempt is not necessarily just hourly and salary. So a non-exempt person is paid for their time. And so that's why you need to make sure that when you're non-exempt, that all your time working is being tracked. And you're eligible for overtime, which is paid at time and a half of the hour regular base pay. And overtime occurs, depends on the industry, but it's typically over 40 hours in a 7-day period. But if you're in other industries like nursing or police or fire, those thresholds may vary. But you are eligible for overtime when you are non-exempt. Typically, the time and a half is also only tied to hours worked and not vacation time. You could be paid, as I said, a salary or hourly. So the salary may just be a chunk of pay for set hours, and then when you go over the 40, then you're going to get time and a half. You can earn any amount per week. Minimum wage is $7.25 an hour generally. And the organization sets that 7-day window, and it stays consistent. Sometimes it's Sunday to Sunday, sometimes Monday to Monday, Saturday to Saturday, whatever it is. That 7-day window is set to determine when the overtime occurs. And this applies in any field, in any industry. So exempt person is paid for their product, their work product, not for the time. So if you're exempt, pros and cons to that, but you just need to get results. So if that means that you're going to work a 60-hour week or a 30-hour week, whatever it takes, you're getting paid for the results and not for your time. Someone who's exempt is not entitled to overtime, so they're not going to get that time and a half over 40 hours in a 7-day period. They must be paid a salary. They cannot be paid an hourly wage, and they must earn a minimum of $684 a week. That's a federal threshold. It's fairly low, but believe it or not, it just recently got pumped up a couple of years ago. And there's 8 categories that the federal government and the Department of Labor have determined are what makes someone exempt. And so there are tests that the position has to go through to determine whether or not it meets the threshold for qualifying for one of those 8 categories. So that's the standard on the exempt and non-exempt and how that plays out for you logistically. Okay, gross pay and net pay. And these are terms that are good for you to know as well. Gross pay is what you earn before your taxes and deductions are taken. So oftentimes when you've been given a job offer, the job offer is indicating what your gross pay is. And it's really important to know that's not what your take-home pay is going to be. There will be taxes. It's going to be determined on your tax bracket, how many withholdings you claim on your federal and state taxes, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Net pay is what you're actually going to see after all the deductions have happened. We'll also talk about pre-tax and after-tax deductions and how pre-tax deductions cost you less in a slide going forward as well. Tax exemptions and withholdings, and I decided to add this early on in doing presentations with Dress for Success because I get so many questions about exemptions, and I get it because you're given this federal tax withholding form and you're asked to fill it out, and it can be intimidating. And so what I always tell people is it's not intimidating, and please don't feel like you're filling it out for the rest of your career. Whatever you elect today, you can change at any time. Now, having said that, you'll drive a payroll department crazy if you change it every 2 weeks, but you are permitted and allowed to change your withholdings based on what you need to do. So first things first, you don't need to claim the same number of exemptions on federal as you do on state. They can be different numbers. Remember, the more exemptions you claim, the less is withheld. So it's kind of inverse. So if you claim 9 exemptions, less is going to be withheld from your paycheck. If you claim 0, the more is going to be withheld from your paycheck. So kind of indifferent that way. So if you think about, you want to make sure that you're going to get a refund, then you may want to claim 0. And if you claim 0, that will increase the likelihood that you'll get a refund from the federal government when you file your taxes at the end of the year or in April. In general, claiming the number of exemptions that you actually have should not result in owing much or receiving much of a refund in general. So if it's you and 2 other people claiming 3 exemptions, should get you pretty close to breaking even. It's helpful to think of it as almost like a layaway plan. So you're going to owe the same amount of money. It's just a matter of whether it comes out of your paycheck or whether you pay it when you file your taxes in April. So if you're going to owe, let's say $500, let's say $520, then if you have $10 taken out every week, then you're going to have already paid the $520, right? So thinking of it that way may help you a little bit. You're not going to necessarily, if you have too much withheld, it's not like you're going to lose it forever and ever. you're going to get it in a refund in April. If you don't have enough withheld, you're going to have to pay and make up the difference. So just thinking of it in those terms may be a little bit helpful. Same for state and federal. For state, I will tell you that be careful about making sure you claim the right county that you live in, because county taxes differ from one county to the next. If you move mid-year, you cannot change the county until January the next year. That's some crazy Indiana rule, but there you have it. Okay, benefits. This is the big one. Health insurance benefits have become so expensive, and it is so helpful to be able to be a participant in an organization's group policy. It's cheaper for you and cheaper for them. But it is not insignificant. So as I said earlier, in considering the compensation package that you're receiving from an organization, getting health insurance benefits is huge. And understanding how much they withhold for the health insurance is really important to understand, because it affects your net pay. So what I often tell people is public sector jobs don't have a high salary often. But they typically have pretty rich benefits. And so then your total compensation package from a public sector job is usually pretty lucrative. Obviously, take-home pay is important. It pays the bills at home. But if you're not having much withheld for your health insurance, you're getting generous paid time off, you're getting retirement plans. Those are things that you don't always get in some private sector jobs. So keep that in mind as you're evaluating your job offer. And make sure you understand whether or not they offer health insurance. And as I said, make sure you understand how much they're going to charge you on your paycheck for health insurance, because it can be wildly different. It could be $10 a paycheck, or it could be $500 a paycheck. So just understanding what those dollar amounts are will be super important as you're evaluating a job offer. So health insurance plans, we'll talk about these briefly. There's the HMOs, PPOs, EPOs, POSs, and HDHPs. I don't think there's any other industry out there like human resources that likes to use acronyms. And we kind of joke about it as a group of individuals who work in the field. And it's not intentional to throw you guys off as employees, but you do need to understand what those acronyms stand for. And we'll talk about that next. HMOs, health maintenance organizations, there's not a lot of those out there. They were set up as a way to try to kind of curb the inflating costs of healthcare. What it was meant to do is to have a gatekeeper. So your primary care physician or your PCP was who you went through before you were referred to a specialist who was often charging more per service. So that was the philosophy behind an HMO. Then PPOs came around, and there's quite a few of those out there still. They're preferred provider organizations. What they often do is have a group of providers out there who agree to lower reimbursement rates, as long as the employees and the participants in the plan use them. EPOs, exclusive provider organizations, those are pretty rare, but they're fairly similar to PPOs, so you may see those out there. Point of service plans, don't see a lot of those either, but what you're seeing an awful lot of are the high deductible health plans, or the HDHPs, and they have HSA accounts associated with them, and those are becoming really, really popular because the intent is to make employees more like consumers of healthcare. And so they do that by saying it's not going to cost you much to be on the plan, so your premium is lower, but your potential expenses are higher. And the thought is that if you've got more skin in the game, so to speak, that you'll be more apt to research and get the lower cost health service out there. So we'll talk about that some more in just a second. So PPO plans, these again typically cost more out of your paycheck, but they have a lower deductible and they often have co-pays. So this example shows that you have a deductible of $300 or $600, depending on if you're covering one person or a family unit. You might have co-pays of $25. So $25 to go to the doctor's office, to go to the dermatologist, to go to the podiatrist. Maybe you can have a co-pay to go to the emergency room. Sometimes you'll have coinsurance, which is only 10% of the total bill. And then your out-of-pocket maximum is $2,000 for an individual, and a family would be $4,000. And understand that the out-of-pocket maximum is, in theory, the most that you would spend for your health care. Now, having said that, your prescription costs are on top of your out-of-pocket. So it is not entirely the total out-of-pocket cost, but it is the majority of your out-of-pocket cost, because obviously for a lot of us, the biggest expenses are associated with doctor's office visits. The difference with the high deductible cost is the out-of-pocket cost is truly the out-of-pocket cost, or the out-of-pocket maximum, because it does include all of your prescription costs. There's not so much co-payments or co-pays like you see in the PPOs. You are paying a co-insurance amount. So the premiums are typically lower. I should create a scenario where it shows the difference of the premiums between a PPO and a high deductible, so that you get a sense for that. The deductible for the family is much higher than it is in the PPO. Co-insurance, 80-20 is pretty common, but you see that the worst case scenario is spelled out for you here. So in the blue plan, and it does cost a bit more per paycheck, but your worst case scenario in any given year as an individual will be $3,000. Sounds like a lot, but it does include your prescriptions and all of your healthcare visits. And some people will have that amount and some people won't. What you can do though when you're on a high deductible plan is you can sign up for a health savings account. And this is the only scenario where you can have a health savings account. And I talked briefly on one of the previous slides about pre-tax deductions versus post-tax deductions. And HSAs are one of them, where you're able to put away money on a pre-tax basis. There are other pre-tax benefits that are available, predominantly in the retirement plans, and we'll talk about those as well. But you can see in this example, you've got the same income, $30,000 income, and then you've got the taxable and the payroll taxes and the take-home pay. Over here, you've got this much coming out pre-tax, so $1,750 coming out pre-tax. So it's coming out of your gross before you're even getting your payroll taxes. So you can see your payroll taxes are different here. The person who doesn't have this HSA account is having $8,400 taken out for payroll taxes. The person with the HSA account is only having $7,910 taken out for payroll taxes. So you'll see they both have the same medical expenses as $1,750, but the person without the pre-tax deduction only has $19,850 over the course of the year to pay for things like groceries and other expenses, whereas a person over here with the pre-tax has $20,000, $340 available in the course of the year to pay for their groceries and other things. So you get to see what the pre-tax benefits are and how important they are. The other thing to note as you're looking at a health savings account is that money is always yours forever and ever. It doesn't go away if you leave the organization, and you don't have to use it or lose it like you used to with some of the other health plans that were out there. That money is available to you whenever you need it, which is really nice to know. A couple other resources that I like to share with folks. GoodRx is a website, and it's actually an app that you can put on your phone that shows you the price differences from some medications. And I cannot tell you enough that it is really, really important to shop for your prescriptions. There are some incredible differences in prices for prescriptions. So if you have maintenance prescriptions, something that you take every month, I would encourage you to go out and shop what your cost is for your prescriptions. It's not always the cheapest to go to Walmart. It's not always the cheapest to go to CVS or Kroger. And it depends from prescription to prescription. So I would highly encourage you to look at that GoodRx website to see where you can get your best bang for your buck for the same prescription. If you are on some maintenance medications, and some of them can be pretty expensive, another resource that I like to share with people is called RX Help Centers. They're actually a local organization, and they are a prescription advocacy group. what they do is they go to the manufacturer, try to negotiate better pricing, and then oftentimes they can get prescriptions for free. And they use other vehicles to subsidize prescriptions. So there is a fee for their services monthly, but they would be able to tell you whether or not they could save you money versus how much the fee is. So again, anyone who's on high maintenance organizations or high cost maintenance drugs, please consider looking at RX Help Center as a resource to help you with getting some medications cheap. Okay, additional benefits. Dental and vision are nice to have. They're pretty cheap. So if you're not able to get them through an organization, you may be able to access insurance for those two benefits elsewhere. But man, they really are nice to have. The reason that they're so cheap is because there is a maximum amount that they pay out. So that's why they're able to kind of manage their risk and keep the costs down. Prescription coverage is huge. So hopefully with your health insurance benefit that would include prescription coverage, you may need to verify that as you're getting a job offer though, to make sure, particularly if you're a person who does have expensive maintenance medications, that it be covered on their prescription plan. If daycare is important to you, they may offer some daycare benefits or even offer some discounts. So that's good to know as well. Life insurance, man, that is one of those things that is so much better to get on a group plan than to get an individual plan. And it's because they're pooling the risk. And so they're able to make the cost of a health insurance plan much cheaper. And usually organizations pay for the life insurance for their employees and at no charge to the employee. Sometimes they also include the cost of disability insurance. So I've got that listed down there. Disability insurance is something that covers short-term or long-term. Short-term is typically after 14 days of being out. Long-term is after being out 90 days. They can cover up to a year, or sometimes they'll cover up to the point of when you would be eligible for Social Security, disability, or retirement. So disability insurance can be pretty nice to know that you have. It really does cover your financial life in the event that you were to be hospitalized or injured in a way that would prevent you from working for a long period of time. Gym membership or reimbursement or on-site facilities is becoming pretty popular just because of wellness programs are becoming pretty popular. Employers like to keep their employees healthy for the purpose of trying to keep their health insurance a little bit more manageable. So you'll see those sometimes. Paying time off. PTO or paid time off includes usually vacation and sick. Sometimes it can include holiday. So you just need to understand what their paid time off is. And if that's something that's important to you because of existing circumstances in your life, it may be important for you to dive deeper into knowing what their policies are. All right, retirement plans. If you're younger, you may not necessarily care about retirement plans or you don't think they're important, but they are, and they're super important, particularly if you're younger, because if you are able to start when you're younger, man, they can really compound and grow over the course of time. So starting early pays out tremendously. There are some terms that it's good for you to know what they are. 401k, 403b, and 457b, those are all the same thing. Those are referring to a federal tax code. 401ks you see in private sector, 403b you see in nonprofit, and 457b you see in local government or government agencies. So just an understanding that those are all the same type of plan, they're just have a different number based on the type of organization that you're working for. An IRA account, you sometimes see that with organization, or a thrift savings account. Those other two at the end are not as common, but some organizations do offer them. So as I said, this is another opportunity for you to use pre-tax dollars. Typically we say if you put $1 in, it feels like 70 cents out of your net check. So when you're in an organization that offers these plans, put away as much as you possibly can, because when you don't see it, you don't miss it. And so certainly look at doing that, because it pays you later at a time when you're going to need it. Oftentimes, employers will put in what's called match money. It's free money, so please don't leave that on the table. Sometimes it's 50 cents to the dollar. So if you put $1 into it, they're going to put in 50 cents of their money into it. So then your dollar has just been upped by 50 cents. So take advantage of the match money if you can. And like I said, if you didn't get it, you don't miss it. So may sound scary and painful at the beginning, but the sooner you start and the more you put in, it's just going to help you in the long run. Other considerations, organizations often have what's called probationary period or sometimes orientation period. And this is when they're evaluating new employees to see if they're going to be a good fit for them. Think about your commute. So be really thoughtful. This is where you're going to have to really evaluate whether the commute is something that you want to take on. How much time are you going to end up spending on the road twice a day, 5 days a week? Are you going to pay for parking? So that's all going to have to factor into that total compensation in terms of what you're going to end up with at the end of the day. What are their hours of operation? So if typically their hours are only 8 to 5, then you could assume that that's going to be the hours that you would work. If they're a 24/7 shop, then it's possible you're going to be working some of those hours too. So be mindful of knowing when they actually operate. Knowing whether it's a seasonal or temporary job versus regular or potentially long-term. Oftentimes employers will suggest to you during an interview process that this is a temporary position that would become regular or long-term later. And they may mean that, but there's a lot of factors that go into whether or not the job that is being offered to you as temporary would become more regular or long-term. Make sure to understand what those factors are. And they're well-intentioned comments that are made to you or promises that are made to you, but be mindful that sometimes things change that are out of their control, that even though it normally would become a regular job in 6 months, things change. Maybe their sales are down, whatever it is. So that may influence whether or not you're going to be able to be a regular employee in 6 months or not. Again, checking their attendance and leave policy. When do you start becoming eligible for paid time off? Flexibility of the workplace, making sure you understand the work-life balance there. If you've got other commitments outside of work, making sure that you're going to be able to maintain those commitments with this potential job offer. Short-term and long-term development and growth. Do they have a plan where they're able and willing and wanting to train people, and just knowing what that long-term forecast looks like for you? Is it a young and growing organization or something that's more established and stable? So those are all part of it too. Attendance and leave. I don't want to spend too much more time in this. Knowing too, for Family Medical Leave Act though, that law applies only to employers that have 50 or more employees. So if you're coming from an organization that had FMLA leave, and it's something that you think that you may need to have access to in the future, making sure you're looking at organizations that offer it or are required to offer it. Paid maternity and paternity leave is becoming a little bit more popular. It's not federally required, so some organizations offer it, but it's pretty rare benefit still today. Okay. So this is going to be our quick exercise. I know I'm running tight on time, but this is just a way to kind of look at, here's 3 job offers that someone has been given, 3 very different jobs, and understanding the pros and cons of them. Obviously, the census worker has the highest hourly rate, but it's going to require that somebody has their own transportation. It's located in Greenwood, and it's only going to last 3 months. That might be okay for somebody for a short term, but it may not fit everybody's requirements. A call center job, $9 an hour, has got sales and marketing component to it, so it's super fast paced. Maybe the hours are 10 to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. But if it's a call center job, making sure you understand what hours a call center is open, because they may do a shift bid and you might have your hours change completely depending on their call volumes. They have benefits that start after 60 days, and it's located in Carmel. Again, do you want to commute to Carmel if you don't already live here or not? A waiter job, $7.25 an hour plus tips. The schedule varies a lot. It's fast paced with high turnover, a lot of time on your feet. Some benefits, but no paid time off, and it's located in downtown Indy. So maybe you'd have to pay for parking. So those are all things that you have to factor in when you're looking at these jobs, as well as the company's or culture, and some other things that might be important to you that we haven't talked about. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward because I want to make sure that people are able to ask questions if they've got any. Just know too that only you know your circumstances and only you know what's going to be best for you. So be sure to be thoughtful about that and introspective and making that list of things that are important to you before you even go into interviewing. Don't be afraid to negotiate for what you need. So sometimes people get a little more passive in that process and just say yes pretty quickly. But be sure to ask questions about things that are important to you. And again, if after you've weighed everything up and it doesn't meet your expectations, maybe it's best to turn it down, but please, please, please do so politely, quickly, professionally, and not burn any bridges. So yeah, that's all I have right now. So Tiffany, if you would, let's open it up for questions and see if anybody's got anything for me.
Perfect. I think, Carmen, did you have a question?
I did. I wrote it down here, so I have just a few if we have time and to give other people time. The first question I had was electing your withholding for state and federal taxes.
Yes.
Is that on just one form, CC?
Two forms, a federal form, it's called a W-4 form on the federal side, and the state, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a half sheet of paper. So there are two separate forms.
Two forms. Okay, thank you. That helps me with that. And let's see, you talked about the out-of-pocket max on insurance. And does that include, let's say a person would have to go to the hospital and have a procedure. Is that out-of-pocket max inclusive of those hospital costs?
Yes. The out-of-pocket max includes everything in the high deductible plan. It does not include everything in the PPO plan. And the only thing that's not included in the PPO plan are the prescriptions.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah, perfect. And let's see here. Two more. The advocacy groups for prescriptions, are you seeing that maybe those are sometimes included as a benefit to employees now, or it's not there yet?
It's still kind of, I shouldn't say cutting edge. It's pretty rare to see employers do it. The City of Fishers did, and a couple other organizations that I know of did. And what I mean by that is, so the organization then paid for the monthly cost, the monthly fees associated with it, because it saves the organization so much money for those high cost maintenance drugs that paying for the monthly maintenance fee just was totally worth it. So I tell individuals about it too, because as an individual, you can get it without any buy-in by the organization. So particularly if you're in a high deductible plan where you're paying for the total cost of the prescription until you meet your out-of-pocket max, it's worth it to get. And sometimes some organizations are excluding medications. Some of these medications, in the City of Fishers had someone who had a high cost maintenance drug that was literally $150,000 a year. And so some organizations are getting to the point where they're saying, we're not going to cover medications that cost over $100,000 a year. But people still need it. And so going to these advocacy groups as either organization or even as an individual makes sense.
Okay, and then my last one is, when or how is the perfect way to ask for a different salary or a different hourly rate than what the employer is offering you when they extend the job to you?
Perfect. So you get the job offer, and hopefully they've sent it to you separately in writing so that you have that opportunity to evaluate it. And you decide that there's a lot of things that you like about the offer. It's an organization you're interested in working for. position sounds challenging and exciting, but you're hoping for a little bit more money. So when you go back to them, you would say, I'm very interested in this position. I was hoping for a salary of X. And back it up by saying, I've got this number of years of experience. I've done some research and some of the competitors are paying this on average. Be able to justify why you're asking for that amount of money. But understand too, Carmen, and everyone else on this call, there are a lot of internal factors that go into a job offer amount. If I'm hiring a position that I have 10 other people doing it, I'm going to have to factor in how much they're making. For me to bring in a new hire to make more than my existing staff is going to cause a lot of problems. And so unless you've got a lot more experience than my existing staff, either at a competitor or something very similar to what my existing staff is doing, it's going to be hard for me to justify it. So just understand there's internal equities associated with it. And maybe the supervisor for this position is making this. I can't have a new hire making more than the supervisor for the position. But when you're going back to the organization to accept or decline the offer, that would be the time that you would say, I was hoping for a salary of whatever the number is.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I had a question.
Yes.
What is the best way to go about setting up a time to talk to someone in HR regarding the different types of benefits? For example, if you are looking to add the insurance you were talking about, if you were injured and you were trying to protect your income, how do you go about setting up a time to evaluate your benefits and making sure you're maximizing all that the job has to offer?
Yeah, good question. So are you saying you're already working at that organization or you're still at the stage of evaluating an offer?
I am currently working,
Okay.
and I've been working at my job for about 7
Uh-huh.
years, and a lot of this information is new, and I'm like, wow, I never thought about, if I get hurt beyond my PTO, once that's gone, I won't have anything else to protect my income.
Right. Yeah, so that's a good point. I would say anytime is a good time, but certainly before open enrollment. Typically, open enrollment is September, October timeframe, sometimes as late as November. But usually open enrollment is in the fall because it has a January 1st effective date. Some organizations make their open enrollment different, but the vast majority of organizations have it in the fall. So making sure you get in before then would be helpful. If they have short-term or long-term disability, that would be a really good question to ask them if they've got those policies that you can enroll in. The other option is AFLAC. AFLAC also has some disability policies. And if your organization offers AFLAC, one of their policies might be through them, or you may even be able to get an AFLAC policy on your own. So that would be another thing for you to explore. But hopefully your organization has those policies because group policies are going to be cheaper for you than an individual policy. It just is.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Any other questions out there? Those are all been good so far.
Okay. Yeah, on the other side of what Gloria just asked, how would you have that conversation with HR if you hadn't been hired by the company yet and you were evaluating what they were offering you?
So you've gotten the job offer and they indicate in the offer letter that you'll be eligible for whatever. And so as you're going through that job offer letter, ask them if you can get more details on policy X, whatever it is you've got interest in. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll give you the summary plan description, and typically it's a pretty thick book. Or sometimes they'll give you, we had a brochure on our benefits that summarized all of our benefits. But it gave enough of a snapshot to let you know what the coverage was. But certainly you can ask for any of that information. Sometimes they post their employee benefits on their website. So they may point you to the page on the website that gives you some more details of the plan too. But yeah, I think certainly, you know, going back to the organization, letting them know that you're very interested in the position, but you've just got some more specific questions. Can they point you to more details on policy X?
Okay, thank you. And I do have one more question. This actually happened to me. It's been a lot of years ago, but it was in the early stages of me interviewing for jobs, and I was offered a position. And maybe it was the way that I went about asking for a different salary, but they turned me down on asking for a different salary, and they also withdrew their offer on the original amount that they had offered me. So it kind of tainted me a little bit on even pushing the boundaries of evaluating what they were offering me and asking for a few days to look at that. Is that something that is just not typical for an employer to do, to say, oh, if you can't accept our offer, we won't even consider giving you more? How would I have dealt with that better?
Yeah, I don't know that you could have dealt with that any better. It sounds like that's just their protocol, and I would say that that's unprofessional and pretty unusual. You know, if we're looking at a candidate that we're interested in, first of all, early on in the process, I would have a brief conversation with any applicant that I was considering moving forward with about salary, because as I said, public sector salaries tend to be lower, and even nonprofit salaries tend to be lower. But sometimes our benefits are better. But as I said, benefits don't pay your bills. And so, you know, being open and candid about that early just helps to set expectations. So we would have a salary range. We pay between $25,000 and $30,000 a year for this position. Are you interested in entertaining a position that pays in that range? Yes or no? Because I've got certain, as I said, certain restrictions for what I can pay based on my existing staff in the same position, supervisors, whatever. And so I don't understand why someone would reject or rescind an offer based on you asking for more. You know, if let's say the position was paying 30 and you said you needed 50,000, then yeah, we're never going to come to terms. But it's still, if you're a candidate that I'm interested in, I don't know why you wouldn't engage in a professional conversation about it. That's unusual to me. I haven't heard of that happening. I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I just mean that I haven't heard of it before, and I'm sorry that it happened to you.
Well, thank you. And like I said, it's been a lot of years ago, and the difference was 50 cents. But,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, the difference was 50 cents. So, but Cece, this has been so helpful for you to take time to do this. This has meant a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Are there any other questions out there? Tiffany, what do you think?
Cool. Well, if nobody else has any questions, Liz will send out an email again with the PowerPoint in there for you guys to look at. I'll put this on YouTube. I'll get that on there today. And the workshops from last week are now on YouTube. I was out last week, so I wasn't able to do those until this week. And the workshop from yesterday is on there as well. If you have any questions in the meantime, you're more than welcome to let us know. And Liz will send out that survey. If you haven't done it already, please consider for us to let us know our feedback. I think that's it, Cece.
All right, awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hopefully we'll see you next week.
Yes, you will.